Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by Semperis. Semperis. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabri, and joining me today for this interview is Jim Doggett, the CISO at Semperis.
Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So, talking about CISOs today.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. So, the evolving role of the CISO in the business of cyber is the headline we have here, and it's been a really interesting role over the years, right? You know, and it still continues to be. It's I think probably one of the most versatile roles or wide roles depending on the company. Like a CISO at a vendor can be very different than a CISO at a maybe a retail company or something like that, or a CISO at a small company versus a big company. For you, where do you see this role going? Where is maybe a little insight on the trajectory in your experience.
Absolutely. And again, I probably need to go back just a little bit of history because I've been doing this a long time, and I completely agree with you. The evolution of the role has been actually not even small; it's dramatic. When I first started, it was largely a CISO role was largely purely a technical role.
Yeah.
You worked under a CIO typically, and your job was to just do security and not report on it, not try to understand how it affects the business. You were just purely there. You found something was wrong, you wanted to fix it.
Yeah.
And then as we started to evolve, all of a sudden, we don't have enough budget to do it all. So then all of a sudden, risk got added into that equation a bit.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you have to balance. We can't do everything, so now we put together plans.
Yeah.
And we'd risk-base them and then try to sell them to the board and the senior management, and we sort of made it to that next level. And that brings us up to where we almost are today, but I think now it's taken the next step where the CISO role is almost becoming a business role.
Yeah.
You're now not, the last role I held at a large corporation as a CISO, I did no technical work at all.
Yeah.
It was a political role. It was a selling role.
Yeah.
But I spent all of my time trying to understand what the business was trying to do, and then where from a security we could support that business, as opposed to putting guardrails around and not letting them do that. So to me, it's very different, and it does require a different skill set. I mean, you have to learn at the CISO level now is how do I explain things purely in English or in business terms, and that just that's not easy to do, and it's a very different role. And politically, you're playing, I hate to call it games, but it sort of is.
Yeah.
You're spending all your time saying, well, I need you to do this, I'll do this for you, and it becomes almost a game at that point. And all at the same time, you still then have that team below that you got to get all the technical work done.
Right.
So it's the evolution has been really fascinating to me, and it's actually more fun now.
And it's not evolved in a vacuum either. The importance of cybersecurity to the business has increased quite a bit as this role has evolved, right?
No, it is. And it's not only has it evolved, but also I think the recognition by the boards and the companies that it is that important is finally grown. And again, you can hate or not hate, but all these major cyber incidents are what's causing this.
Yeah.
You take advantage of every.
A lot of people say thanks to ransomware for,
No, in our company especially. Yeah. That is, I would, if it wasn't for ransomware, I would not have joined probably Semperis.
Really?
I grew up in a world where, and again, Semperis is into Active Directory. I grew up in a world where I didn't worry about Active Directory. Yeah. It was just a piece of infrastructure that worked, and I never thought about it.
Right.
That evolved over time to now, if that infrastructure goes down, and the whole company goes down.
Yeah.
So.
And the CISO role, I think another thing that we used to see is somebody maybe down at a director level would get the CISO role. And again, that's another thing that's evolved where we do actually see CISO roles at the executive level now more often.
Yep.
And like you said, more of that business enablement role. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
You mentioned political, but how can the CISO role help the business? How can it be less of like a loss prevention or
Right.
fraud group? More, assisting sales, assisting the company grow and sell more.
Yeah, that's to me. It's I would characterize it almost as enablement. In other words, if you could take away a risk that something bad will happen,
Right.
then hopefully then the business has the confidence to take risks and head in new directions to grow the business. If you're worried about security the whole time and that something may go wrong, then all of a sudden you're not doing that.
Yeah.
Probably the best example I can give of that would be resiliency today. And again, historically, CISOs didn't worry about keeping the business going. They worried about theft of data.
Right.
And now you've got ransomware where the resiliency and keeping the business operating is big. That is a huge issue to, again, I don't care which business unit you go to within a company, they all care about that.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about, let's take a hospital or a healthcare chain. If the resiliency doesn't work and you get an outage, how do doctors actually prescribe? How do they treat patients? How do they do surgeries without all that data? And my time there in the healthcare, the doctors I talked to said the only surgery they would do if their systems were down would be emergency surgery, nothing else.
Yeah.
Liability's too high.
And that's interesting because we've seen sometimes business continuity is part of the security team, and sometimes it's under operations, it's separate. So do you feel like today it's important that business continuity, disaster recovery, all that should be under the CISO?
I don't think it necessarily needs to be under it, but the CISO has to include resiliency from a cyber attack as one of their key functions. And I'd even make a case today, it is the most important function they have.
Yeah.
If someone breaks in and steals data, that hurts.
Right.
Someone breaks in and
shuts the business down.
It's a lot worse. That's when you get fired and sued, and there's plenty of great examples to go out in right now and see that's happening between SolarWinds and you go on and on there. So, I think it's absolutely an area that, again, most CISOs were not trained in this space. They were preventing, detecting, and fixing, but not recovery.
Right.
And recovery is what it's all about right now.
And so I've got a good friend who's actually he's at a point in his career where he's looking at his first CISO role.
Okay.
And he's basically done the job of a CISO before. And I know you've mentored CISOs before. So in 2024, what advice would you give him going after tackling a CISO role today?
First of all, think in terms of what helps the business first. You start with that as the problem. What do I want trying to accomplish? Yeah. Then you take.
So you need to understand the business really.
If you don't understand the business, I don't know how you can do the job today. Yeah. I completely agree. The second aspect, though, from a business perspective, is you've got to learn to compromise. Historically, CISOs and people that came from a technical world, there's a right, a wrong, and no gray in the middle. And you've got to learn a whole lot of gray.
I've known some,
and I've replaced several that's how I got hired as a CISO because they could not.
Inflexible.
Yeah, and you can't be that. And ultimately, you got to remember that security, 90% of security is not done by the security team.
Right.
It's done by the business.
Yeah.
All you do is you advise, do policy, and monitor.
Yeah.
You don't actually do the security in general, so
And just looking ahead, what kind of emerging trends or challenges do you see integrating cybersecurity with business strategy, and how should CISOs prepare for some of these challenges?
To me, it's a pace acceleration. And again, everyone wants to talk about AI today. Mm-hmm. To me, it's just another tool.
Right.
But it's a tool that accelerates good and bad. So it's not something we can't ignore. But I advise so many, again, a good example is that AI today is like a shiny ball. Everyone's sort of driven to it. But don't forget the basics still. And that's the problem I think too many companies are doing now is they're chasing the shiny ball, and yet they're still not patching their systems and doing the basics, which you have to still do. So that balance I would recommend for CISOs coming up now. You have to reach a balance of that. Yes, you can't ignore AI.
Yeah.
To me, that will certainly be a trend. Machine learning, you can go through all of these things. The other aspect that I think that all CISOs have to focus on is identity.
Right.
You just don't have a choice today because with our perimeter almost gone, there is no network perimeter anymore. With cloud, with vendors coming in and customers coming in, you have no perimeter anymore. So the only way you need to make sure that whoever is logging in as John Jones is John Jones,
Right.
and they have the right privileges. And that is, to me, the next wave of all the software that's got to come out and all the tools that have to be out there is how do we make sure whoever's doing work on our behalf is the person they're doing and they're doing the right things.
Right. Yeah, I just talked to a CISO a couple minutes ago before we started this interview.
Yeah.
His works for a large investment bank, and they're already using generative AI, and he's here looking for solutions to help secure their use for it. So, it seems like some of the compromise you're talking about where, you're not going to be able to get ahead of it necessarily. You do what you can, but you can't stand in the way of what the business needs to do or wants to do a lot of the time.
We learned so much from cloud. To me, this and cloud are the same kind of ed rate. We went through cloud. We fought it forever.
Oh, yeah.
You can say what you want, but almost every large company out there, and even a lot of small ones, said we're not ever going to go there.
Yeah.
It was inevitable, and there's no doubt
and
to
SaaS
me.
before that.
Yeah,
right?
and you just keep going. There's going to be no difference here. The only thing is, cloud was like a 10-year runway before it became acceptable.
Right.
I think AI is going to be
2,
3. It's going to be something a little different, but nevertheless, you can't fight it.
Yeah.
As a CISO, you've got to learn how do I help the company use it to its best ability. And here at Semperis, what we've just done is put guardrails for the time being. Here's what you can put in. You can use it, but you need to talk about it before you start using it. And what data are you going to put in there? Are you putting confidential data that we don't want in there or not? And there's things like that. So we're just taking a practical approach right now, but over time it will have to accelerate.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Security Weekly. My podcast is Enterprise Security Weekly.
Good one as well. So, pleasure, Adrian.
Thank you.
Very nice to talk with you.
And if you want to learn more about Semperis, you can go to securityweekly.com/Semperis, and that's spelled SEMPERIS RSAC. So Semperis RSAC.
Perfect.
And stick around. We'll be back at you with another interview in just a few minutes.